She doesn't fear the man who yells. She fears the man who doesn't flinch. Because the moment you stop chasing, the game broke. And if you've ever been called emotionally unavailable for protecting your peace, this video will change the way you see every woman who once made you question your worth. She called you cold. She called you arrogant. She said you're the problem. But here's the truth, my friend. You weren't cold. You were calm. You were finally done performing for someone who kept moving the goalposts. And this is where everything flips. Because when a woman can't influence you, when she can't provoke you, control you, or guilt you into reacting, she won't just walk away. She'll attack the one thing she can't stand, your freedom. That's why this video matters. Because once you understand what's really happening, why your detachment drives her crazy, why your calm gets called toxic, why your silence has more impact than her screams, you'll never doubt your power again. And when we get to number 7, you'll learn the exact moment her ego turns against her body, and why the man she pretends to hate is the only one she can't forget. 1. She called you emotionally broken because you didn't chase. She called you emotionally unavailable, not because you hurt her, but because you didn't chase her. She tested your attention span, pulled away, got quiet, tried to bait you into proving you cared. You didn't flinch, you didn't beg, you just stayed grounded. And that's when the labels started. You're distant, you're cold, you must have issues. But here's the truth, brother. You weren't cold, you were just unbothered. You didn't fold into her emotional spiral, and that felt like rejection. See, most modern women are conditioned to expect validation on demand. They don't understand men who stay still. They confuse stillness with absence and silence with emotional damage. What really happened? Your self-control broke her script. She needed you to prove something, and when you didn't, she needed someone to blame. So she chose the easiest target, your masculinity. But let's be honest. If you were truly broken, she would have walked away quietly. Instead, she started a story. One where you're the villain for refusing to be controlled. Because the man who doesn't chase becomes the mirror. And what that mirror reflects, she's not ready to face. Hold your ground. Because in the next point, we'll uncover why the peace she claims to want is the very thing that threatens her most. 2. She says she wants peace, but hates when you stop arguing. She says, I just want peace. But the second you give it to her, she pulls away. You stopped raising your voice. You stopped reacting to her little digs. You stopped explaining yourself over and over again. And what happened? She said you don't care anymore, that you're too emotionally distant, that you're not the same man she met. Why? Because peace, to a woman who's addicted to emotional control, feels like abandonment. If she can't stir the water, she can't measure her power. And when you remove the chaos, she's forced to sit in her own reflection. She thought she wanted a man who calms the storm, until she realized the storm was never outside her. It was inside her all along. That's why she picks fights after a quiet night. Why she creates tension just to test your response. Because if you don't argue, she feels unseen. But brother, never forget this. A man who doesn't argue isn't passive. He's just chosen himself over her performance. The truth, she doesn't want peace, she wants proof. And when she doesn't get it, she'll call your stillness withdrawal, your composure disinterest, your silence a red flag. Not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped doing everything right for her ego. In the next section, we'll expose the exact moment you pass her test, not by reacting, but by refusing to take it at all. 3. You didn't fail her test, you passed by not reacting. She wanted a reaction, that eye twitch, that jealous response, that emotional spike that proves she still has power over you. So she tested you, brought up an ex, delayed her replies, posted that story she knew you'd see. And you didn't blink. No text, no panic, just silence. She told herself you failed, that you didn't care, that you're emotionally numb or already moving on. But deep down, she felt it, the shift, the threat, because what she calls failing the test is actually you passing it with brutal precision. You didn't react, and in her world, that's the one thing she can't control. Women test not to push you away, but to measure your center. Most men break. They chase harder, over-explain, or explode. But a stoic man, he watches. He lets the storm pass, untouched. And when the test collapses with no emotional reward, she starts asking questions she never dared ask before. Why isn't he reacting? Did I lose him? Has he moved on? Or does he just know who he is? That's when the dynamic flips, because silence is power, and power, when she can't influence it, becomes obsession. You didn't fail, brother. You refused to play, and that to her is the greatest threat of all. In the next point, we'll explore what happens when she realizes the man who ignores her chaos doesn't disappear. He takes over her mind. 4. The man who doesn't enter her drama lives in her mind. You didn't yell, you didn't chase, you didn't bite the bait. And yet, you're the one she can't stop thinking about. Because the moment you walked away without a performance, you created a silence too loud for her to ignore. A silence filled with questions she has no answer for. Why didn't he fight back? Why didn't he try to fix it? Why did he let me go so easily? That stillness, that emotional control, it echoes in her mind louder than any argument ever could. Women are used to a certain rhythm. She pulls away, he proves himself. She causes tension, he reacts with validation. But when a man refuses that dance, when he disengages with clarity instead of chaos, he breaks the loop. And when the loop breaks, her ego scrambles for meaning. Not because she lost you, but because she lost the control you refused to give. She replays everything, your silence, your calm, the moment you looked at her like she was just noise. And in that replay, you grow, not as a villain, but as a mystery. The less you engage, the more space you take up in her mind, because the mind hates what it can't predict, but the ego hates what it can't affect. You didn't disappear. You became the question she can't answer, and that is power. In the next point, we'll expose the one thing that makes her spiral even harder, the silent weapon of every truly grounded man, walking away without warning. 5. She can't handle the man who walks without warning. She was ready for a fight. She was even ready for tears. But she wasn't ready for silence. You didn't slam the door. You didn't announce your exit. You just stopped showing up, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And that, brother, shook her. Because most men give a warning. They plead, they argue, they try one last time. But when a grounded man walks away without drama, it tells her one brutal truth. He never needed her to begin with. No closure, no scene, just peace. And peace, to a woman used to power games, feels like punishment. That's why she calls you heartless. That's why she rewrites the story to make you the villain. Not because you hurt her, but because you didn't give her the ending she could control. See, when you walk away in stillness, you leave behind something more powerful than an apology. Doubt. Doubt about her worth. Doubt about her effect. Doubt about the value she thought she brought to the table. And in that doubt, she spirals. Because you didn't leave to manipulate. You left to protect your energy. And that kind of exit, the one without noise, stays with her longer than any screaming match ever could. In the next point, we reveal why this quiet departure creates the ultimate shift, the moment your independence becomes the trigger that unravels her control. 6. You don't need her? That's why she spirals. You didn't say it, but she could feel it. You didn't need her. You enjoyed her presence, but her absence wouldn't break you. And that is what triggered her spiral. Because for many modern women, validation has become currency. She trades attention for control. She trades emotion for influence. So when you show her that her presence doesn't alter your peace, you pull her into a storm she can't navigate. She starts doing what she once mocked. Texting first, posting for your attention, bringing up deep conversations she used to avoid. Because the man who doesn't chase is rare, but the man who doesn't need is dangerous. You've now flipped the dynamic. Where she once measured your value by your pursuit, she now questions her value in your indifference. And here's what cuts deep. You didn't leave to make her jealous. You didn't pull back to teach her a lesson. You simply stopped pouring energy into someone who believed your attention was guaranteed. When you stop needing her, you force her to confront a fear most won't admit, that she was never your center, only your option. That's why she spirals. Because the one man she couldn't manipulate is the same man she can't replace. And in the next point, we'll uncover the brutal truth she hides even from herself, that what her ego rejects, her body responds to without question. 7. Her ego hates what her body craves. She says you're the problem, too cold, too unreadable, too detached. But then she dreams about you, stalks your profile, remembers how your voice sounded when you said nothing at all. Why? Because her ego and her body are at war. One wants power, the other wants presence. She tells her friends he's emotionally unavailable, but when she lies in bed at night, it's your silence she replays, not the words of the man who begged for her attention. You didn't give her chaos, you gave her clarity. And clarity can't be manipulated. That's why she resisted it. That's why she called it boring. That's why she walked, and why she still thinks about walking back. Because you were the one man she couldn't dominate, the one man she couldn't shape. And despite all the labels, you're still the one her nervous system remembers. Her ego wants to erase you, but her body doesn't lie. It remembers how still you were, how grounded, how unaffected by her games. And that stillness broke the pattern. What her ego couldn't influence, her desire couldn't ignore. She craves the strength she tried to shame, because even if she never says it out loud, you became the standard. In the final point, we'll reveal why her hatred is proof of your freedom, and why walking away was never weakness, but the final act of power. 8. She hates you because you're already free. She doesn't hate you because you hurt her. She hates you because you didn't need her to heal. You didn't beg for closure. You didn't write a long message trying to explain. You just moved on, without noise, without war, without a scar that needed validation. And that kind of freedom, it doesn't just confuse her, it threatens her, because most men stay stuck in the orbit of her approval, trying to fix, prove, explain. But you walked away with calm in your chest and certainty in your stride. That's the real reason she resents you, not because you were cold, but because you were complete. You didn't need her to define your value. You didn't require her permission to detach. And most importantly, you didn't let her chaos infect your clarity. Freedom isn't walking away. It's walking away without losing yourself. And you, my friend, did exactly that. That's why you're still in her head. Why your silence still echoes louder than the words of every man who tried too hard. Because you didn't lose her. You released her. And in doing that, You became the one man she'll compare the rest to, but never be able to reach again. In the final conclusion, we'll seal this mindset and remind you why this energy isn't just powerful, it's rare, and it's yours. So let's get one thing straight, my friend. You were never the villain. You were the boundary. You were the mirror that reflected everything she didn't want to face and everything she couldn't control. She didn't hate you because you were cold. She hated you because you didn't crumble. You held your silence. You walked when it got manipulative. You didn't explain yourself to someone who already decided not to understand you. And that's not weakness. That's presence. Because the man who can stay grounded when tested, the man who chooses clarity over conflict, peace over performance, is the rarest kind of man in her world. So don't second-guess that silence. Don't regret the exit. Don't let her narrative shake your truth. She'll call you names to protect her ego, but deep down, she knows what you really are: unreachable, unbothered, and unforgettable. And if that energy made her spiral, then good. Because now she knows she never had power over you, only access, and you took it back.